Welcome to Uncovered Biblical History and Traditions, the channel dedicated to lost stories of the biblical past. Discover stories of pre-Christian historical roots, biblical legends, lost church history and forgotten historical characters of faith. It is very helpful if you hit the like, subscribe and share. Help build my channel and let's take a look together into these uncovered forgotten tales. Imagine it's 1st century Britain, and a small boat approaches the misty shores of what will one day become England. Among the passengers stepping onto British soil is a woman whose name will echo through history, Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ. Sound impossible? What if we told you there's more evidence for this extraordinary claim than you might think? Today, we're diving into one of history's most intriguing mysteries. Did the Virgin Mary actually finish her earthly life not in the Holy Land, but in ancient Britain? Here's something that might surprise you. After Jesus' crucifixion, Mary virtually disappears from the biblical record. Think about it, this is arguably the most important woman in Christian history, yet the New Testament tells us almost nothing about her later years. It's as if she simply vanished into thin air after her son's death. But what if she didn't vanish? What if she simply went somewhere no one expected? The traditional story most of us know goes like this. Jesus, dying on the cross, looked down at his beloved disciple John and said, "Behold your mother," entrusting Mary to John's care. End of story, right? Mary lived out her days with John, probably died in Jerusalem or somewhere in the East, and was buried in one of the many sites that claim her tomb today. But here's where our mystery deepens. John, who lived to the remarkable age of 101 and wrote extensively throughout his long life, never mentions Mary again. Not once. If Mary was living under his direct care, wouldn't you expect at least a passing reference? The silence is deafening. This is where our story takes a fascinating turn. Enter Joseph of Arimathea, not just the wealthy man who provided Jesus' tomb, but according to some traditions, Mary's uncle. Joseph wasn't just any influential figure, he was what we might call today a political powerhouse. He held the triple crown of 1st century authority, member of the Sanhedrin, provincial Roman senator, and noblesse decurio. To put this in perspective, the Roman statesman Cicero once remarked that it was easier to become a senator of Rome than a decurio in Pompeii. Now here's the crucial detail that changes everything. Ancient documents suggest that John didn't keep Mary under his personal care at all. Instead, he entrusted her to his own, meaning his community of disciples, with Joseph of Arimathea as the primary guardian. The term used in these documents is paranymphos, meaning the guardian, and remarkably, only John and Joseph were ever given this title in relation to Mary. Think about the logic here. John was a hunted man, constantly on the move, with no permanent home for years after Jesus' death. How could he provide the security that a woman of Mary's significance would need? Joseph, on the other hand, was untouchable, too powerful for even the hostile Sanhedrin to challenge directly. Now our story moves to the Mediterranean. Non-British sources, and this is crucial because it eliminates any potential British bias, report that Mary was among the passengers on a boat that arrived at Marseille. From there, the trail leads through Gaul, modern-day France, and eventually to Britain as part of what historians call the Josephian mission in 36 AD. But why Britain? At this point, some critics scoff, asking why anyone would go to what they dismissively call a barbarian country. But these critics miss the point entirely. Mary's journey wasn't about missionary work, it was about survival and family bonds. Consider the political reality. In 36 AD, the Sanhedrin expelled all Christian faithful from Judea. Would they really have made an exception for Jesus' mother, the woman whose very existence reminded them daily of the man they had crucified? It's unthinkable that they would allow Mary to remain while banishing everyone else. Here's where our story becomes truly extraordinary. British sources describe Mary's presence at Avalon, now Glastonbury, with the same casual certainty that modern historians might describe Winston Churchill's presence in London during World War II. They mention her living there alongside Joseph, Mary Magdalene, and the Bethany sisters as if it were common knowledge that shouldn't surprise anyone. But there's something even more remarkable about Avalon. According to tradition, Jesus himself had bequeathed Mary a dowry, a small wattled temple he had built with his own hands at this sacred site, where he would commune with the Father. When Joseph built the first church at Avalon, he continued this dedication to Mary, as did Saint David in 540 AD when he erected a stone church over the original wattled temple, encasing it in lead for preservation. Here's the kicker: dedications to the Virgin Mary didn't begin until the 12th century, except for this one at Avalon. The British Church, unlike the Roman Catholic Church, never deified Mary, maintaining that Christ alone was divine. So why would they make this singular exception unless there was a very specific historical reason? The evidence supporting Mary's British residence isn't just traditional folklore, it's documented in multiple historical sources. The Cotton manuscript Titus, along with testimony from the British historian Capgrave, describes how John formally appointed Joseph as Mary's guardian while John himself was evangelizing in Ephesus. These sources describe Mary's final years in detail, including the gathering of apostles and disciples who came at her bidding to be by her side as she breathed her last. Joseph, faithful to the end, personally laid her to rest, just as he had done for Jesus' tortured body years earlier. Meanwhile, what about all those sites in the east that claim to be Mary's final resting place? Here's where the investigation becomes particularly interesting. None of these eastern sites have withstood serious historical scrutiny. More tellingly, Saint Jerome, who was commissioned by the Roman Church in the 4th century to catalogue all the sacred sites of the East, makes no reference to Mary's tomb, or Joseph's, for that matter. Jerome's silence is particularly significant because he would never have overlooked the burial site of someone who would later become so central to Catholic devotion that she would almost overshadow the glory of her son, Jesus. His omission strongly suggests he knew these figures weren't buried in the East. The Roman Catholic Church's current designation, the Chapel of the Dormition near Jerusalem, has priests pointing out a ledge where they claim Mary's falling asleep occurred. But this appears to be more tourism than history, as none of the original disciples mention her tomb in their extensive writings. Let's step back and consider the human element of this story. Mary had just watched her son tortured and killed in the most brutal fashion imaginable. The land held nothing for her but danger and traumatic memories. Her only remaining happiness lay in being with those who had known and loved Jesus. Joseph, her uncle and protector since Jesus' childhood, had pledged his life to the Christian cause. His family responsibilities had dramatically increased after the crucifixion. Would this man really abandon his widowed, traumatized niece to the mercy of the very people who had killed her son? The documentary evidence suggests something far more logical and humane, that Mary lived out her days surrounded by people who loved her, in a place of safety, where she could find some measure of peace after unimaginable loss. Critics often dismiss this story by claiming Jesus never visited Britain, therefore he couldn't have built the wattle temple that formed Mary's dowry. But this argument reveals a fundamental logical flaw. Mary's journey to Britain with Joseph was based on valid circumstances entirely independent of whether Jesus had ever been there. These same critics never explain the 18-year gap in Jesus' life between age 12 and 30, yet they assume that what they don't know about couldn't have happened. As our investigation reveals, their minds seem cluttered with intellectual weeds, assuming impossibility based merely on their own ignorance. When we examine all the evidence, the documentary testimony from multiple international sources, the logical reinterpretation of Jesus' final instructions, the political necessities of first-century Judea, the unique Glastonbury traditions, and the failure of competing theories to withstand investigation, a remarkable picture emerges. Mary's journey to Britain wasn't some fantastical legend dreamed up by medieval monks. It was the logical response to extraordinary circumstances by people trying to protect someone precious to them. Joseph of Arimathea, with his unassailable political position and family connections, provided the one safe haven available in a world that had become hostile to everything Mary represented. The evidence suggests that Mary, the mother of Jesus, did indeed finish her earthly journey not in the land of her son's crucifixion, but in the misty hills of ancient Britain, surrounded by people who loved her, in a place where her son had once built a small temple with his own hands as a gift to his mother. If you would like further context and the rest of the story, check out previous videos and future videos. If you would like more information where to research this subject, pause this image and look into these resources or find resources in description. If you have book sources or links of your own on this subject, please share in comments or email me. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this forgotten biblical story. Leave a like, comment, share and subscribe. This is very helpful. Join me next time for another lost story of our biblical history. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.